thousands, tens of thousands of people...
But it's not illegal to come over on a boat.
Tens of thousands of people have come here through safe and legal routes.
James Cleverly, the man sitting here, being interviewed by Kay Burley on Sky News when he was Foreign Secretary, has now become Home Secretary.
Is it illegal to come on a boat?
But where people have illegal migration facilitated by people...
You're calling it illegal, though, Foreign Secretary. Why are you saying it's illegal? It's not illegal.
Because we have legal routes, and we have routes which are clearly illegal.
Oh, that's so much clearer now. Here he seems to be struggling to make himself clear.
So you say coming over on a boat is illegal? On a small boat?
Yes.
So why don't we arrest them?
Because the point is
why don't we arrest them?
Well, when we take people into basically the protection of the UK state, we have to process them. And what we're doing is we're creating a system. Well, look, semantically, the point is that we are making sure that we are now able to process those people.
No, the question was about illegal immigration, and what is it? So, as I said, Cleverly, or not so cleverly as he's known, has become Home Secretary, and this will mean he will face up against Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. So, let's have a look at their first exchange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the new Home Secretary to his post. He is the 8th Conservative Home Secretary in 8 years. And what a mess he has inherited. The court conclusions today are damning. It exposes the complete failure of the Prime Minister's flagship Rwanda policy, exposes a complete failure of the Prime Minister's judgment in making it the central part of his policy, and the complete failure of Conservatives to get the most basic grip of their boats and asylum chaos. No serious plan on the dangerous boat crossings that are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk that all of us want to see end. No serious plan to sort out the chaos in the asylum system, people in costly asylum hotels because of the soaring backlog that should be ended, and the readiness to spend over £140 million of taxpayers' money on this plan, money we can't get back now that this policy has totally failed. And it adds to the disastrous judgment of the Prime Minister not just appointing and backing the previous Home Secretary, who was unfit for the job. Now, I don't agree with pretty much anything his predecessor as Home Secretary ever said, but she was right on this message to the Prime Minister. She said, if we lose in the Supreme Court, you will have wasted a year and an Act of Parliament only to arrive back at square one. Your magical thinking has meant you have failed to prepare any sort of credible Plan B. Wasting time, wasting money and letting the country down. That is the Conservatives' record. Now, the court outlines the catalogue of problems with the policy, but ministers knew all about them. When it was first announced 18 months ago, I raised in this House the problems with the Israel-Rwanda deal. They were warned many times about failures and weaknesses in the Rwanda asylum system, but they just pressed on. And even if it had been found lawful today, they've admitted it would only have covered a few hundred people anyway, at a time when 100,000 people applied for asylum in the UK last year on the Conservatives' watch, and that would have also cost around twice as much per person as deciding cases in the UK. The truth is the government has wasted not just 1 but 5 years of failing to deal with this. 5 years ago there were just a few hundred people crossing in boats, but they let criminal gangs take hold along the channel. They let asylum decisions collapse, so the backlog soared, and there are now 20% more people in asylum hotels than there were when the Prime Minister promised to end them. So will he now tell us how much in total has the government spent on this failed Rwanda plan so far? The House has a right to know. He says he wants a new treaty. How much more will that cost? And the court judgment says, despite his optimism, it says of the changes that are needed, the Rwandan government indicated that the contemplated arrangements might not be straightforward to implement in practice. And the court says the provision of resources does not mean that the problems we have described can be resolved in the short term. So again, more of the magical thinking. And what does this mean for the Prime Minister's flagship legislation? Because he boasted about passing it only yesterday, but the government hasn't actually commenced the central clauses of the law, because without Rwanda, and frankly even with Rwanda, the policy doesn't work and will just lead to an endless, ever-increasing permanent backlog. So can he confirm now he won't in fact be implementing the central tenets of that law this year? And can he confirm that this means the Prime Minister's pledges to introduce the new law, to stop the boats and to also to end hotel use will all be broken this year? And why will he not put that money into a proper plan to tackle the boats? I don't believe the new Home Secretary ever believed in the Rwanda plan. He distanced himself from it and his predecessor's language on it. He may even, on occasion, have privately called it batshit. But he and I agree. We need action to stop boat crossings that are undermining border security and putting lives at risk. We need a properly controlled and managed system for asylum and refugees. So let's concentrate on the things that can work. We support the work with France along the northern coast. We want it to go further. We support the work with Albania, with other countries across Europe to tackle the gangs, but it is frankly far, far too weak. We need a proper, comprehensive, massively scaled up plan to go after the criminal gangs and a proper system to clear the backlog, to have a proper returns unit in place so we can end hotel use. And instead of that cost going up from £6 million to £8 million a day on his watch, let us end hotel use and save the taxpayer £2 billion. That should be common ground. So I could suggest to him that he stops wasting taxpayers' money on more failing schemes, that he ditches the magical thinking and the culture wars of his predecessors, and that he ditches the gimmicks and finally gets a grip.
Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I think one of the dangers of writing a critique of government policy before you've read the facts laid out in the statement is the statement makes the critique obsolete. She talks about hotel usage, which I might remind the House is coming down. She talks about small boat arrivals in the UK, which I will remind the House are coming down. She talks about closer working relationships with our European partners, which I will remind the House we are already doing. I've written here in response to the various questions, does she have a plan? Does Labour have a plan? And Mr. Speaker, if the benches opposite could curb their enthusiasm and listen to what I was about to say next, I was going to concede that it's clear they do have a plan. And their plan, their great idea, is to do what the government is already doing. Mr. Speaker, which is why we are bucking the European trend when other countries are seeing 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100% increases in their illegal arrivals. We are seeing a third reduction in ours, bucking the trend. We have always said, Rwanda and the deterrent effect of the Rwanda plan is an important tool in our toolbox. We have never claimed it was the only tool in our toolbox. We have pursued, and when I say we, I of course mean my right honourable friend, the Immigration Minister, with me watching him from King Charles Street, but the collective we is appropriate here. We have always pursued a range of options, and as I set out in my statement, those activities are having an effect. And Mr. Speaker, my final point, the mask has slipped. The mask has slipped because the glee that I detect on the other benches for this temporary setback on the delivery of this plan displays what we on our side of the House know to be true. They don't want migration control to work. They don't want to take control of their own borders. They would rather delegate it to anybody else.
Just sorry. I want to hear the Home Secretary. I don't need the front bench. You may pull your face. The bottom line is I want to hear it quietly, because our people also at home, our constituents wants to hear it. When you're chunnering so loud, they cannot. Home In which case, Theresa May.
Whatever you may think of Cleverly, I imagine at least he'll have the decency to turn up to the Commons.
Mr Speaker, I notice there's no Home Secretary this morning, unless the member for Bassett Law has been appointed Home Secretary in the last few hours, which, to be honest, nothing would surprise us.
Click here for one more last disastrous coffee interview.